Good morning, everybody. We're back for session 2 on board governance here with the Nonprofit Management Institute. And wanted to just welcome you back and give a quick overview of some Zoom reminders. These sessions are being recorded. It's important that you all give authorization for that. That's when you get that little pop-up that says, just want you to know it's being recorded. We mute everyone upon entry, and we want you all to feel free to use the chat, the raise hand feature, and we also encourage you to show your video when you have a chance, if you're comfortable with that as well. We love to see your faces. I know when we go to gallery view, that's really how Dr. Palmer likes to check in and make sure that people are engaged and with us. We'll get into a little bit more of the format for these sessions and some sort of spaces that we'd like to create here as a part of these sessions. Wanted to make sure you all knew where to grab that annotate feature, which we'll be using right off the bat here in a couple slides. If you go up to the top of your Zoom screen, you see a black, at least on my screen, it looks black. It says view options and has a down arrow. You click on that. And about the third one down, it'll say annotate, and you click on that and you'll have a toolbar that will pop up that will allow you to annotate when we go to, say, a white screen that we have coming up. Also want to invite you to grab some paper, blank paper, if you have some around you, probably about 6 or so sheets. We'll be doing some artwork. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do artwork, but we will have you using some blank paper for that as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jean Tedrow to give our welcome.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. And really welcome back, everyone. If there's anybody on the in the program this morning that wasn't with us last week, feel free to, feel welcomed back with us into this session. Those of you who joined us last week, we hope that was a good session for you. And we're excited about today's program, which is on board governance, a very, very important module. And I just want to shout out to Dr. Palmer because she is going to facilitate and train on this subject this morning, and you're in for some good information, etc. So before we get into the program, we'd like to acknowledge our sponsors and our supporters. So if you change your, do you want me to do the agenda? No. We are just going to acknowledge our sponsors and our supporters. Triangle Community Foundation. Tanaya Sudrith is with us today. Perhaps I can't see everybody on my screen. Steve Hayes from Guilford Consortium. And Resourceful Communities. Tasha is, I believe, with us this morning. So welcome all of our sponsors and our supporters. And I will turn it over back to Lisa to get us going with an introduction of the program and the agenda for this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jean. Good morning, everyone. Everyone looks so bright-eyed and ready to go. Just want to go briefly through the agenda for you. Again, please remember that we don't give a lot of homework or pre-readings because this series is a live interactive workshop. It's not a traditional webinar, so to speak, because we'd like to keep you keep you engaged, and also have you doing activities during your breakout groups. So that's why it is set up this way. So for the agenda, we're going to go through a brief introduction again. Dr. Palmer will go through your assessment results and findings from last session. And then we're going to dive into board governance. As Jean mentioned, it's a pretty heavy topic, not a lot of song and dance. Sorry, folks. It's a pretty heavy information. So we're going to go through the duties and expectations, financial management, accountability and evaluation, composition, bylaws, and legal compliance. Now, I'm sure, as most of our other institutes, you will have a series and probably lots of questions. We're going to do our best to get to them, answer them the best that we can. We don't do an intensive dive because, again, that session will be longer than three hours. So just make sure you just be patient with us so we can get your questions answered. And we should be fine. Today, again, we have our production and co-host team between Rebecca, Leslie, and I that will try to field your chat questions as best as possible so Dr. Palmer can get to them all. And again, like last week, we'll funnel in our breaks. You know, if we see someone jumping up and down, waving your hand, say, okay, then we'll take that as a signal that we need to take a break. But other than that, we'll try to schedule them in as best as possible so that way you'll get a chance to stretch your legs. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca to talk about some ground rules.
Oh, looks like we're having some
Backwards.
issues with our slides. I think Leslie's working on getting them to come up for us. She's probably going to reshare here and see if it'll work. It seems to be skipping. Hold on. I'll get started talking a little bit about the space that we hope to create here online as we're a part of one another's mornings for several sessions. One of the things that we've talked a lot about internally is moving from safe spaces to brave spaces. And so we have some sort of guidelines or suggested guidelines that we'd all like to follow when we're here in this space and working together in this time. The first is that we encourage participation from all, and that means that we want everyone to feel comfortable to share and to be open and to sort of be authentic. And that's part of creating that safe space where people feel like they can share things. We all here respect the inherent humanity and perspectives of others. We hope that you all will seek to first understand rather than just to be understood. So to really listen to one another and take in the feedback or the things that people are sharing and perspectives that we're all kind of being a part of in this group. And then the last is that we sort of all want to take responsibility to demonstrate a collective commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. This is certainly something that the center is working on. We're in the midst of actually updating our strategic plan to go ahead and incorporate a lot more of an EDI lens into what we're doing. It's there, but we're trying to infuse it throughout everything that we do. And I know some of you are working on that as well. So we invite you to share your thoughts and feedbacks along those lines when it comes to EDI and want to know what's working for you and what's not. But hopefully that rings true for you all and you can feel comfortable to be a part of these groups with us and to bring your whole self and to challenge one another in respectful ways and to sort of just feel like this is a space where you can do that. Our main sessions are recorded and we share that recording with you all to watch and view afterwards, whether you want to catch up on something or you missed a session. Those are always shared in the wraparounds. Our breakout sessions are not recorded. And if you all choose to record those, that's something you all have to decide as a group, but we do not record the breakout sessions. We want that to be your own space and time to share. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Dr. Palmer. Thanks for being with us again. We're always delighted to have you with us.
Good morning and welcome back, everyone. Please let us know how your technology is working on your end. Technology is great, and we definitely are glad that we can bring this to you live and virtual. But if you have any kind of technical issues or challenges, please let us know. And we'll do the same if we do. So I just kind of wanted to kind of start off with saying that. It was so great to meet each of you last week in our first session, the orientation. And so I thought what we would do this morning, keep in mind, we do have over 50 people that are signed in this morning. And so as we are posing questions and wanting your feedback, know that we want to try to get to everyone if we can, but if we don't, I'm apologizing in advance because of the number of folks that we have that are with us. But I did want to just kind of get started this morning with some conversation and some conversation around last week's orientation session. So I thought I would pose a question, and the question is, what do you remember from last week's session?
Mm.
So anything at all, what do you remember seeing? What do you remember hearing? What do you remember learning? You can put your information in the chat or your feedback in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that. Or you can just unmute yourself and share with us. What do you recall from last week?
Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Harold from Shepherd's Care. I'm sorry. From Shepherd's Care. The thing that stood out with me and it stayed with me all week and everything that I did was the build, thrive, sustain. I took that with me in every meeting, in every discussion, even in my personal life, because it just made sense. And that it is, we needed to do an assessment. We had a board meeting last week. I expressed to the board that I was in this great class, and this is something that we're going to work on to kind of help us plan the next year. And we were given this huge award to do some other outreach material, so we're going to use that model to help establish that. So the build, thrive, sustain framework was the best thing ever.
Great. For that feedback. Can we refer to the chat and see if there's anything there, Rebecca or Lisa? Do you all see anything? I thought I saw some items pop up.
Yeah. I love, where is it? I think Rosemary, Kelly, we have a lot to do. We have a lot to work on, LOL. That was the first one I saw.
Oh, wow.
A lot of
Okay.
reference to the 12 principles, management conditions, majority management conditions, principles. So that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of comments
Great.
to that. Mhm.
Okay. Anybody else that just wants to unmute and share?
There was a letter sent out. I guess you guys got the.
Good morning, everybody. This is Torrance. One thing that I remember from last week was, well, not remember, realize from last week was each stage is going to restart at some point.
Mhm.
So you may get to thrive, but then changes happen like COVID, or you get a new director, or you get a new initiative, or you change the business model. So it all starts back over. So it's a constant. It's never going to be, I get to thrive and stay there.
Mhm. Yeah, Jessica felt the same way you did, Torrance. Yeah. She said the same thing.
And maybe one more, if you'd like to unmute. And I do see quite a bit popping up in the chat. So if folks would want to kind of pay attention to that. Is there anybody else? We're going to dive into some brand new information.
Okay.
So,
Good morning. Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Dr. Palmer,
Hey,
and
Dr. Torrance.
good morning, and other leaders. What stood out for me, of course, was the build, thrive, and sustain, but also the 12 principles, thinking about the worksheet and focusing in or honing in on the top 3 made a lot of sense for me. So just thinking about that and moving forward within those 3 with my board and my team. So thank you for that great question of reflection.
Awesome, thank you. So we're gonna kind of move on into our session. The next thing we'd like to do is to try to hear from you as it relates to a little bit of more of an introduction. So like I said, you know, we do have quite a few of us that are in the class or in the group kind of working, and we've only had one session. You did have some breakouts, so some are, you know, some folks a little better than others. And so what we wanted to do is to show our state map and get some feedback from you about the county that you are in. And so if we could go back to the slide of the, and then I'm going to pose my question and try to get some feedback from our group. So we know that each of us are located in a different county. And so there are 100 counties in the state of North Carolina. I am physically located in Guilford County. And in terms of thinking about Guilford County as it relates to the intro question today, or the introduction question. So the question is, share something about your city or county that it's known for. So share something that your city or county is known for. And you can use the chat if you prefer, or you can unmute yourself and tell us who you are, what county you're in, and kind of what your county is known for.
This is Michael.
This is-
I'm with the Arts Council
Hanover
of Fayetteville,
County, Venus
Cumberland County.
flytrap. Go ahead.
I'm in Cumberland County, and we have Fort Bragg.
Oh, yeah. Okay, right.
I'm in Buncombe County. We're known for retirement meccas and beer.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sheena Beasley from Guilford County, and we're known for our many universities and tech colleges.
Yes, I think there's about 7 or 8 in Guilford County.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Eric Lewis, and I'm in Mecklenburg County, and we're known for Queen Charlotte, and also that UNC Charlotte is one of the fastest growing universities in the state.
Okay, thank you.
And the home of Johnson C. Smith.
Okay, all right, thank you. That was Eric, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right, okay, thank you. We are all over the state. I'm looking at the map and kind of how you all have plotted. Now, Cumberland, how did you turn your location on the map green? How did that?
On the draw, you have a pen or a highlighter, and then I changed the format color, and then I highlighted it.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay. Anybody else want to give a shout out? Audio.
I'll give a shout out to New Hanover County. We're based in New Hanover County, but serve a 31 county region along the North Carolina coast. But New Hanover is a wonderful place for beaches and the Cape Fear River.
Okay, thank you. I am headed to New Hanover County this afternoon. So, all right. Thank you all so much for sharing. Lisa, any comments there?
I was giggling to myself because someone said about Wake County that there's too many people. A couple of people said that. I thought that was cute. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Durham County for Black Wall Street. Thought that was pretty good. So
Okay.
just looking at some of the comments, but I think you're good.
So proud to be in North Carolina, right? I am North Carolina born and bred. So thank you all for helping us to get to know a little bit more about where you are located geographically. And goodness gracious, like I said, I'm looking at the map and we are all over the place. And I see that there's someone in Guilford County used that highlight function. So that's a new tool for all of us to be mindful of. Thank you so much. The next thing I want us to do is just kind of revisit the capacity building framework that we talked about last week. So if we could go to the next slide and just kind of take a look at our framework. And you can shout out the answers to these questions or you can post it in the chat. How many principles and practices guides do we have? So we've got 12 principles, that's right. 12 principles, but we have one guide, right? We have one guide and we have 12 principles. And how many management conditions? What's that framework? 3 management conditions. I saw one person said over 200. Was it practices? That's right. We have 216 practices. And then, of course, we have 2 levels or 2 ways that we can assess capacity. We can look at it from a basic level, just across each of the principles, identifying, being able to identify where we are or what we want to work on as it relates to building capacity. And then we have a more deep dive of an assessment, which is what we all did. And then you got your results back before today. And so we're going to look at those group results. We're going to look at the whole cohort's results here in just a minute. And so we're going to kind of pay attention to that. Did I cover all the pieces of the framework? So we have a guide, we have principles, we have 3 ways to consider where we are as it relates to capacity. We can assess capacity, and we have over 200 practices that we are sharing as it relates to the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits principles and practices. So thank you for that feedback. Go ahead, Lisa.
And I have one more question to throw in there. And how many principles are we covering for this institute? That's another question.
I saw
How many?
Kelly. Kelly, did I see your hands go up? See, Chris? Uh-huh.
How many principles are we covering during the institute? See, great. Okay, great. I see 6s. That's right. Patrick,
Yeah.
Kelly. Great. Okay.
All right. Thank you all. The next thing to kind of keep in mind is in front of the principles and practices guide, we give instructions on how to use the guide. And so pay attention to that as a useful tool for you. It looks like this, of what you see on the screen. And so it has all the different components of our framework outlined in the front of the guide. So by all means, refer to that as you need to. So one of the things that we did last session is we assessed our capacity, and we were able to send you a copy of the results. And so I don't know, Rebecca, is there anything else I need to mention about that before I go into what the results are?
Nope, I don't think so. If Rosemary, I can forward you yours. I believe went out first thing Monday morning, around 8 a.m. And if you didn't get it for some reason, feel free to let me know. Also, if some of you didn't get around to completing it, we can send you the link again so you can take it. I will say the way that SurveyMonkey is set up, that if you take it and you hit submit, you can't go back in. So you either need to use a different browser to access that link for SurveyMonkey, or you'll need to, we'll have to send you a new link, new collection link. So I see a couple of folks saying they did not receive them. We'll go ahead and between Leslie and I will go ahead and resend those to you and confirm that you received them.
Great. And definitely once you do that and you get your results back as we move forward, if you have questions about it, feel free to bring those questions back, to the group. So we can definitely incorporate that as we move along for those of you who are not, who don't have that in terms of this morning. So can we go to the results and findings report since we have for the group? And then as we're getting teed up for that, were there any items that when you got your results back, was there anything surprising, or was there any kind of findings that appeared that you have more thoughts about, or that you'd like to share, or you'd like to comment about before I do the group's results?
Leslie, if you need me to, I can share the assessment results.
I don't see any comments about the individual results. But again, as we move along, if you do have any comments, you feel free to share and or if you have questions. So here are the Institute results and findings. So this is our entire group. And of course, we are focusing on 6 of the principles. Board governance. So we're just showing you how the results were tallied, and we are using SurveyMonkey as our platform. And so you share with us those areas of capacity that you would want to work on in the coming year or 2. And so when you look at board governance, for example, you'll see how many of us, what percentage of us mark the items under build. And then of course, the same for thrive and sustain. So I'm gonna highlight a few things. We're not gonna necessarily read verbatim the report, but I do wanna highlight that for board governance across the 9 practices, there was pretty much a balance in terms of focus and areas of wanting to build capacity as it relates to board governance. And of course, that's our topic for today. So, you know, we'll be able to provide more information there. You can go ahead to the next one. And then for program design, management, and evaluation, if you look at the very bottom at sustain, the majority of us are wanting to focus on evaluation and looking at the use of evidence from our evaluations, focusing on participant outcome achievement, community impact, and really whether or not to continue a program. So looking at it from an evidence-based perspective is a focus for that particular area of capacity. And then you can go ahead to the next one. For our cohort for strategic planning under build, the first practice to document success and lessons learned, that was the #1 area under strategic planning. And then there were 2 competing areas. The first practice under thrive in terms of a SWOT analysis, and then the first practice under incorporating equity indicators in the strategic plan. I know Rebecca mentioned that earlier when we were talking, and I'm gonna just kind of leave some time for Lisa or Rebecca to give any insight in terms of the Center for Nonprofits and what we are doing as it relates to EDI and the strategic plan or strategic thinking and management. Any further comments there?
Oh, you want me? I'll go ahead and share.
Well, I know you did earlier,
Yeah.
so I just wanted
Yeah.
to leave space for it.
Yeah, so I mean, similarly to sort of how our principles and practices guide is set up, we have one section that's EDI, right? But what we want to shift towards is not just having it be this one thing that we do, but actually incorporating it into all of our programs and services, thinking about public policy and advocacy efforts and how we can infuse EDI, and thinking about sort of what sort of parameters we want to put around that, or what sort of goals we might have pertaining to those issues or those items. And so part of what the center is trying to do is to sort of lead by example, hopefully. So we're open to sharing sort of where we have seen success, where we have messed up, and being really vulnerable about those things, because we feel like people can learn from one another's successes as well as their challenges. And so we're hoping to sort of that others will feel free to share those things as well, right? To create a space, a brave space where everyone feels like, okay, we're in this together. We're going to make an impact together. So
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was on mute. I was talking the whole time. It's before Rebecca came in until I realized I was on mute. So, great job, Rebecca, for jumping in.
All good, all good.
So we can go to the next principle. So the next principle is financial management. And if the most emphasis here for us as a cohort is under sustain. And it's the first practice to identify and implement new revenue generating strategies. You know, so one of the goals of quite a few of nonprofit organizations is to diversify where our resources, our dollars are coming from. And while that is not an easy lift, we definitely strive to do that. And so that was a primary area of focus in the results of the capacity assessment that you all completed. We can go ahead to the next one. So we had 3 practices here that were pretty close in terms of emphasis. So under build, it was informing donors and communicating with donors. And then under thrive, it was networks and donor relationships to influence giving. And so those two go together. And then for sustain, it was consider new income resources. So that aligns with that financial management focus of diversifying revenue streams. And we know that when we're managing our finances and we are also engaged in implementing a fundraising plan, those should be working in tandem, because we need to be aware of where we are financially so we can gauge how we do fundraising and implement and determine fundraising strategies. So that is the fundraising. And then the last one is human resources. And the primary area here was under sustain to support ongoing leadership development, educational opportunities, and career paths for staff. So professional development and really paying attention to what our staff's needs are so that they can grow and develop and be more impactful in their work. So that's the results of our cohort. And I don't want to move too quickly beyond having you share any thoughts that you have as it relates to your individual results, those of you who have that already. Any thoughts, comments about?
This was timely for me. We're working on our strategic objectives and the framework that we're using for our 3-year strategic plan. So the principles really supported and bolstered the work that we're doing. Although it's non-prescriptive, it really felt reinforcing to that. So the approach that I took was to break down some of these and use them within each year. So for year 1, our focus will be on human capital, equity and inclusion, and board governance. In year 2, partnerships and collaboration, program design, measurement and evaluation, and civic engagement. And then year 3, the strategic communication, planning, and information and technology. And of course, ongoing fundraising and development, legal compliance, and financial management. So that's how I broke it down. And it hasn't been fully adopted by the board yet, but it just gave me a whole fresh perspective on that framework that will influence our strategic plan and the measurements that we take. So again, we know that those threads in all areas will be worked on in a cyclical format, but it gives our board and our leadership team a real direction and those focus areas to hone in on. We find that because we're a clearinghouse of services, we could go all over the place and we can fill all the gaps and we can, go back and dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and we can be everything to everyone, but we really need those guiding principles, and we really need to make things more digestible. So that was really helpful. And this terminology takes everything we've been discussing and keeps it really simple. So I like that too, just even adopting some of the terminology, put words to our discussion that would have taken me a whole lot more time to do without this. So thank you.
Thank you, Heather, for that feedback. And thank you for the description of how you're able to utilize this and customize it for your use. You know, it is a primary goal of ours for the Nonprofit Management Institute that we focus on the how-to. The what is great, but if we don't know how to do what we've shared, then it doesn't impact your organizations in a way that's going to be fruitful. So I really appreciate you describing that, and specifically how you're able to use that as it relates to your strategic plan. Is there anybody else? I'll leave space for one more. If not, then the last thing I'll say about the results in terms of the cohort, you can use this assessment task as a 360-degree type of task. So you've completed the assessment, but you could also share it with others, either your staff, your board, or any other thought partners you might have, to help to kind of think through strategy and to think through where we are as it relates to our level of capacity and what is it that we would like to work on or that we desire to see change as it relates to capacity. So in terms of just a real quick recap of all that we just covered, is your individual results, the cohort's results and findings and how we can use that information, and specifically those areas that we saw that as a cohort that we need to work on or that we want to focus on. So just kind of emphasizing that. And then the other task that we wanted to complete here is how to actually use the framework and how to actually use the results to really help us to be able to manage our nonprofits in a way that meets our needs, because we know every organization is at a different place in terms of development. You're at a different place in terms of what your goals are, what your focus is. And more than that, all of our nonprofits have a different mission, a different purpose, and we're trying to address different areas of need, let's say, in our communities. And so we want to I just want to kind of make sure that we just kind of wrap all that in a bow in terms of what we've just covered. Any thoughts or questions or comments about any of that? If not, we're going to get ready to go into our new content, which is on board governance. But before we do that, could we show the information around the definition of capacity building and capacity assessment? So one of the things that we try to do is we review your feedback after each session, and we try to make sure we incorporate what you need. And one of some feedback that we did receive, or there was a question around, well, what is capacity and what is capacity building? And, you know, what's the difference in the two? So this particular handout is actually located in our strategic planning curriculum and material. And so we went ahead and just kind of pulled this out to highlight this morning in terms of thinking about capacity and capacity building in particular, but also what you'll find here is capacity assessment. And so the way we at the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, the way we view capacity is that the capacity of a nonprofit is reflected in that nonprofit organization's ability to manage growth and development to achieve its mission and vision. So that's how we kind of benchmark, if I could use it in that way, kind of what we mean as it relates to capacity. And then I'm going to go ahead and drop to the bottom of the page here. Capacity building is implementation, and it's implementation of strategies and techniques that nonprofits engage in so that they can grow and develop, so that we can all achieve the mission and the visions that we aspire as it relates to the nonprofits that we that we work on. Thank you, Rosemary. It is a part of our strategic planning material. And so I just wanted to highlight that, especially as we're talking about the capacity assessment. Assessment can be, yes, doing a self-directed or self-evaluation of the capacity of your nonprofit, but it could also be multiple ways in which you assess. And that process encompasses reviewing and examining. So we look at the management condition. We determine the principles and practices that we want to enhance so that we can continue to grow and develop. So you do have this in your material, and we just wanted to go ahead and share that because we did see that there was a question about that. And after all, we just assessed capacity, so it just made sense to go ahead and kind of share that with you. Any comments there? So if we could go back to the gallery. So we are now getting ready to go into our new material. And I'm going to inquire with my team that we take a break at this point before we go into the board governance material. And then when we come back, we'll be ready to, we'll refresh and we'll go right into that material. Is that okay? I see Rebecca has given me a thumbs up and so has Lisa. Thank you. All right, so we're going to take about a 5-minute break. Does that work? And so we're at 10:13. So how about we just come back at 10:20? Even 10:20. Thank you. Is that there is probably a little bit more of kind of fact sharing and information sharing. We are going to do some hands-on work, and we're also going to use breakouts as we kind of move through the next couple of hours of our time. But keep in mind that a lot of what we really need to know as it relates to board governance is pretty factual. Now, there are some elements of board governance where some of what we know to be true is directly related to kind of the culture of your board, the profile of your board, et cetera. And we'll get into the weeds in that here in a minute. There is a lot that we could cover as it relates to board governance. So we have identified these specific areas that we're going to work on. We are going to be referring to handouts and worksheets in your course materials document that you have, binder that you have. And so just know that we are going to be gathering and sharing quite a bit of information. I mean, we share a lot of information anyway in all of these sessions, but please feel free to unmute or let us know that if you have a comment or something you would like to share. So about an hour ago, Rebecca asked you to have handy some blank pieces of paper. I don't know if anybody caught on to that or heard it or what have you. And so, and then she also shared that we were going to engage in doing some artwork. Well, it might feel a little bit like that, but it's probably far less than that. But we do want you to create an image for us. And the image that we want you to create is we want you to draw for us on one sheet of that paper. We want you to draw for us a board meeting. And in drawing that board meeting, we want you to include your board members. You can put in this image the shape of the room, where people sit. I know we're all virtual right you represent, then please highlight that. Am I coming through okay? Can everybody hear me okay?
You cut,
froze for a little bit on my end.
yeah, you
Okay.
froze for a little bit during your last
Okay.
sentence.
All
maybe.
right, the little message came up, the internet connection. So I just saw that. So I will reappear. I am not going anywhere, I promise you. So if something like that happens, I will definitely get right back on. But am I good now?
Yes, and can you repeat your last set of instructions?
So the instructions are to draw an image of one of your board meetings. So if you are a part of a board or a member of a board, or if you have observed a board, or if you have ever attended a board meeting, draw us an image of that. Is somebody trying to talk? I thought I heard something. Okay. Okay. Give us an image of your board, the space that you use, the way people sit. And I know that we've gone virtual. I know that a lot of us are meeting using a virtual platform. But if you can remember or recall when you met in person, or if you've ever observed a board. So I tried to cover all bases with how you could create this image. Are we okay? Are we good?
You have a question on asking what should they highlight?
So what you're giving us an image of is a board meeting, and you are creating that picture for us of what we would see if we had attended that board meeting. So is it a round table? Is it a square table? Is it 10 board members? Where do people sit? That type of thing. Does that help? Okay. So you get to choose the board. You get to choose the image that you're creating for us. I promise you we're going somewhere with this. I promise. So just try to give us a thumbnail sketch of what we would see if we showed up at that board meeting. And we've got a couple of these hands-on tasks for us to complete at the beginning. And then once we get past some of this, it'll be a little bit more information giving and sharing.
You want us to draw this in the computer or?
On your piece, on the piece of paper that Rebecca asked you all to kind of have some blank paper handy. That was Torrance, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do we need more time for that? For you all to do that? The next thing I want you to write on the paper, now that you have your image, is I want you to write 2 attributes of that board. 2 attributes of that board. Just kind of write it in the corner somewhere. Just attributes and what we would identify as 2 attributes of that board. And of course, all of our boards have board members, right? Yes, you could use characteristics. That's a way to talk about it. When I say attributes, it's also some positive, right? If we have an attribute, that's an asset. That is that's something that's beneficial to us. And then once you've done that, so we've asked you to identify 2 attributes of that board. You've given us an image of a board meeting and what it looks like when the board gets together for its meeting. And I'm thinking you've got some board members in that image. What would you consider to be, if you identified one of those board members, what would be 2 attributes of that board member? Or it may be yourself if you're on that board. So collectively, I've asked for 2 attributes of that board. And then I've said, hey, hone in on one of those board members. Okay, now here's the reveal. So we're all in gallery view, right? Can you hold up your image in front of so we can see what these.
If you're using that blur feature, you may have to turn it off. Yeah, some of you are noticing that. If you're blurring your background, you may have to turn that off so we can see what you're putting up there. Nice. Thank you.
Okay. So I see Michael at the Arts Council. I think that's Cumberland County and Fayetteville. Looks like a square. I see a lot of squares. And Rose has stars that look like a heart. In terms of that, Walker, because you're using the background when you hold yours up. Let's see. Torrance has a conference table, looks like there. Let's see. Is it Francesca? Looks like there's a circular view. Lisa, what else do you see? Do you see? I'm switching them back and forth on the frames of the gallery.
Yeah, so am I. I see a lot of
Okay.
circles, squares, TVs in the front of the room, monitor.
So Emma has like 5 round tables in terms of the setting. Where are your board meetings, Emma?
So we have them sometimes in, we have to have them in an accessible location. So we'll sometimes find a 1-story building or a hotel conference. And we also use that time at least annually to introduce board to staff. So typically we'll have a bunch of round tables and intermingle. Then we leave and they stay at those tables and somebody is at the podium who's
I
speaking.
see. Okay, great. Okay. All right. Thank you. So one thing that you notice, right, Lisa, is that there's a lot of different configurations in terms of how boards gather to meet, to govern, right? Can someone share the attributes? You can put them in the chat or you can just do shout outs if you'd like. Diverse, okay. Routine, responsive, okay.
Business, strategic, engaged.
Okay.
Committed, passionate, inquisitive, committed. Engaged, supportive, passion,
And go ahead
vision.
and add the ones for board members as well.
Interested, but not engaged enough. Interested, too small. Wisdom, dedicated. Analytical, mission driven, visionary, good, member of the community, super busy. Good
Well, one thing
community.
that we want to say at this juncture, if you have served on a board or if you are currently on a board, hand claps for you because these attributes describe you and your colleagues that you serve with. We do a lot of heavy lifting in nonprofit organizations, and board governance is at the top of the list in terms of the fundamentals of the nonprofit structure. And so board of directors, board members provide governance and oversight. You know, that is the responsibility. We hire executive directors and we hire staff to do the day-to-day work. And so again, hats off to you. And I see a question. It went away, but I saw a question in the chat. But
Dr. Palmer, it was my question. So I see the definitions of board of directors and board member, and I noticed you're using them interchangeably, but I'm just not clear. I'm new to all this too, so just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, so let's refer to that. That is the handout that aligns with this work that we're doing on page 31. And I'm grabbing my manual here so I can flip it over to the right page. And thank you for your question. So the board of directors is the entire group. The board of directors is the whole group. The board member represent that group of board of directors. Does that help?
Yeah, so the board of directors is more the general term for the, but they're one in this, I mean, sort of the same, right? So
the board members make up the board of directors.
Board of directors, got it. Okay, so they can be the same. Yes. Got it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And so what we want and what we desire are engaged board members. We want active board members. That is what we want, and that's what we strive for. But we also want board members to know what their roles and responsibilities are from a governance and oversight perspective. And so it's important for us to orient our board members to this upcoming experience they're going to have serving on our board as a member of the board of directors. So very, very important in terms of that. We're going to move on to another step, right? So board of directors, board members. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the organizational structure of a nonprofit, okay? Org structure of a nonprofit. Many of your nonprofit organizations have an organizational chart, you know, and so you in terms of how it's set up. So we want you to use another piece of the paper that you have there at your disposal. And we want you to draw the org chart. And if we could go to the slide, we want you to use these particular roles to create to create an image of what an org chart looks like for a nonprofit. So we want you to include the board of directors as one unit, the executive director or the president and CEO, volunteers, staff, and 4 board committees. So I'm going to go back to the top of what the ask is. So the instructions are draw an org chart. And in the org chart, show us where you would place the board of directors, the executive director or president and CEO, volunteers, staff, and 4 board committees. So your image of an org chart, this is ABC nonprofit. This is not necessarily your nonprofit, but this is ABC nonprofit. And I'm going to leave some time. I'm going to go silent here for just a sec in order for you to create that image. And I'm also going to be referring to handouts in your manual. So know that as we move through this, we are highlighting pertinent information about board governance. So you are drawing an org chart on one of the pieces of paper that we asked you to have, and using these roles. Okay, if we could go back to gallery view, and again, the big reveal. So we want you to show us, just kind of hold it up. We want you to show us your image. How did you utilize, let's see, where are the board of directors and where's the president and CEO and where? Okay, Asia, I see yours. Lisa, what do you see?
Gotta remember to unmute. I see a lot of, yeah, I see some pretty good stuff with board of directors being on top.
Yep.
Kelly, can you maybe explain yours a little bit? I'm trying to follow your arrows.
Yeah, I tried to put some interactive parts and pieces together. Obviously the board being at the top, but the executive director working back and forth with them. But most nonprofits I've been a part of, the committees, a lot of times will work with staff members like your development director for fundraising or the finance director for the finance committee.
Can you hold yours
then-
up while you're talking? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. That way we can follow what you're saying.
Sure.
Okay.
And then volunteers, working with everyone else. The board brings in new volunteers.
Okay.
Staff brings in volunteers. The interaction with the ED, relationship building. I see it a little more circular than just a
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, good.
matrix of following down the list.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you.
And one more time, can you hold your images up? Because I'm going across frames and I'm looking at 3 frames here. So, okay, all right. Okay. So one of the things that's important is for, as board members, is for them and or us, because I serve on boards as well, is to know how nonprofits function. Because oftentimes board members will confuse their role with the day-to-day operations roles of staff. And so it is important to onboard board members and help them to know what that picture looks like so that they don't misrepresent themselves, right, as a board member, and that they don't err on the side of engaging in day-to-day operations when they're staffed to do that. Now, it's very appropriate for board members to assist, support, volunteer, be engaged. But when a nonprofit has hired staff to perform certain duties and responsibilities, it's important for board members to understand the difference in that. So if I could, here's the big if I could get my team to show you what the org chart looks like for us. So this is going to be in the CBR information. And I think, there we go. So here is the image that we hope you created. How many thumbs up do I have? That this is what you created. Lisa, did you want to talk us through this image or?
I can.
Okay.
So as you can see, which is pretty simple to follow, your board of directors should be on top with its committees on the bottom. Now, normally you can't have equal committees in terms of people on each committee, in terms of what is the finance committee, if it's a executive committee, you'll have different committees which will help with board meetings, because again, if committees are formed and they're discussing issues of that are brought to the table, when it's time for your board of directors meeting, it would definitely shorten your meeting if committees report out on whatever they're talking about for the meeting. Then of course you have the executive director, which reports to the board of directors and is hired by the board of directors. And then anyone below the executive director, meaning the staff and the volunteers. Can you scroll up a little bit, Leslie or Rebecca? Okay. Report to and only to the executive director. That's a very important point.
And I
It
think I
probably would be
saw-
helpful. I'm thinking about this, to put names of committees. So if folks are not familiar with what committees can be formed from the Board of Directors, probably should put that list here for next time. We'll do that.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah,
get.
because we
we'll
have
get that.
fundraising, sometimes you have human resources,
Mhm,
some create ad hoc committees.
Right.
This image here is implying standing committees.
Mhm.
And so, so depending upon the way in which your board structure is composed has a lot to do with what the names of those committees are. And also the mission or of your nonprofit has a lot to do with that. Some of your nonprofit boards have mandated roles, or you have roles that you are required to have. Some of your boards might have requirements around composition and how it's structured. So every board structure is different. Every nonprofit organization structure is different. And so, but typically, just in terms of practice, it's the board of directors and all of the pieces that are connected with the board. Then your executive director is working with the board in these capacities. And sometimes executive directors will also assign staff to work with a particular committee. So that's another way in which that can work as well.
And I have a quick question for the group, Dr. Palmer, if you don't mind.
Yes, please. Yeah, go ahead.
One quick question. Are board of directors considered volunteers? And you can just put that yes or no in the chat box. Are they considered volunteers in terms of the board of directors? And should there be any paid staff? I'm sorry, should board of directors be paid? Should they serve on your board as well? Can you have a paid person? Maybe you're doing a project with this person, a consultant, and they serve on your board. What do you think that?
You've got a lot, it's popcorn happening.
Yeah, I
in the
see, not
chat.
to be paid. Yes, volunteer. Yes, good. So yes, they are considered volunteers. And if you have, if you have a lawyer or someone of special practice that's on your board, that could be considered a conflict of interest if you are to engage in any business with that person that is on your board and they're being paid to either consult or work on something with you. So as long as you keep that in mind. That's right, Val. Yes, no, I don't think nonprofit board members should be paid. That's right. That's right. No
Yes,
payment, right?
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure we made that point.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So just to kind of continue with what the responsibilities are of a board of directors and or board members, go to page 32 in your manual. And I'm going to go silent for just a second and let you review that and let me know if you have any questions. It's page 32.
It's like Margarita has her hand raised.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Go ahead.
I just have a question. For example, if we want to do like a board training and the board members have to miss work, for example, is it okay to do a compensation for the time because they're missing work, or no way?
No. No. They are not paid. They are not compensated. You might pay for their gas. You might pay for their lunch. You know, you can do that. But paid a wage in exchange for board service for 501c3, no.
Dr. Palmer, is it prudent for them to, so for example, if you have a lawyer, they can do pro bono work for the board, but not payment work, right? So kind of like in-kind services.
Yes, they can do that. However, if your nonprofit decides that you want to secure their services, then they roll off the board.
Recruit, right, they recruit themselves on the board, yeah.
Yep. Yes. And I know sometimes you know, some nonprofits will say, well, they're not voting, you know, yes, they're providing a professional service and we, you know, we're working with them, but they don't vote. My suggestion would be, and recommendation would be to step aside, right? So that there's no confusion about their, as it relates to conflict of interest. You know, so it just kind of it's helpful in the long run.
As you bring up conflict of interest, right? So isn't that a form that you have the board sign so that you can kind of like get there pretty quickly as far as some kind of no conflict of interest form that the board fills out so that you can actually establish that as one of the criteria for not paying, etc.
Yeah, so I think I'm understanding your question. It is customary for board members to sign a non-conflict of interest policy. And typically that's done annually.
Right. Thanks for clarifying my question.
Yeah. Thank you. Very good questions. There is a question, Rebecca and Lisa, about how often the legal compliance checklist is updated in alignment with duty of obedience. It's just a question about how often is it updated.
Our legal compliance checklist is updated annually.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think we've got duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience. So when we look at this org chart and we look at where the board is located and the committees, their primary responsibility is governance and oversight, right? Those are the umbrella kind of overarching areas of focus for a board of directors. But we are expected, right, to function in the spirit of duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience. Francesca has a question.
Yes, so if we have teachers on our board and then we have an after-school tutoring program and they're helping out with that, we can't compensate them in any way for their time of teaching?
No, not if they are a board member. Not if they are a board member.
Okay, and a board member is anybody on the board?
That's exactly right. That's
Board
right.
Okay. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah. Rebecca, do you want to comment about the link you put in the chat?
Yes, this is the newly updated 2022 version of our legal compliance checklist. It is a free download for any members, so make sure that you are signed in, logged in. You can download that for free on our website. It is a $25 fee for all others, and that can be, shared amongst your colleagues throughout your organization. That becomes a resource that you can share with your staff and board members. A question here from Eric, does that include board advisors?
Are you talking about like an advisory council?
Yes, I just threw that in as a question. Yep.
So it depends. So advisory councils are not considered, right, the official board of directors. However, if your nonprofit has an advisory council as a part of its structure, it's the appearance of governance and oversight. It's the appearance of that. So you would have to make that judgment call, right? But if they are engaged in, if they're voting on anything, which typically advisory councils don't, but if they're just sharing insight, giving information, making recommendations, maybe helping study and review a particular matter or concern, then that's a little different. But I would have to know a little bit more about what their function is. But they are not considered the board of directors.
Yeah, I actually, so I think because of their influence and their heavy influence, I actually always try to treat them as board members because they're so influential. It could create that conflict of interest as well. So I can say, hey, I'm not on the board, but I'm a board advisor, and I can get paid for what I'm doing. So but that's why I one just to throw it out as a discussion point.
Yes, and to go just a little bit further with that, you always want to think about if this was taken to task legally, how would you explain? I mean, that's really what it boils down to. You know, that if they're providing information and influence around decision making, let's just say of a legal matter, we don't know where that can go. So I always just kind of say, you know, you just want to be kind of mindful of, I say more formality is safer than less formality. So that's kind of how I would. Rosemary, I see you nodding your head. Okay, let's move on to one more piece of work, and I think we'll take a break after this. So we're going to go into our next topic, which is duties and expectations. Now, we've already discussed the duty of loyalty, duty of care, and duty of obedience. And I hope I did not leave anyone behind, right? I hope we all understand what those three are, and you have it in your manual and all of that. I don't want to leave anyone unclear about what that is. Are we good? Can I go on to the next topic? All right, great. So duties and expectations of our board of directors, duties of board members. We do want our board members to attend meetings. We want them to participate and be engaged and assist our nonprofits with the work that we all do. But there's another document that is very important when it comes to board of directors, and it's the bylaws. The bylaws is the document that explains the governance and oversight. It frames the governance and oversight for a nonprofit organization. And we're going to screen share here a sample bylaws. Now, I think it would be helpful if you've never reviewed or seen the bylaws for the nonprofit that you represent. If you've never seen the bylaws of the nonprofit that you represent, I would encourage you to review those. This is just a sample for the purpose of the training. And so notice that in the bylaws, there's an outline of the organization in terms of its purpose. You can keep moving. So for this nonprofit, there's a purpose, there's some principles for practice. There's a section on meetings and how the meetings should be structured. There's an indication of the regular meetings of the board. There's a section on voting and how the board should vote. And then there's the order of business. So this is your agenda. And then in terms of the board of directors and what constitutes a quorum and who manages the organization is reflected here. Here, we've highlighted that it's an expectation that every board member give an annual financial contribution to display 100% financial support. And we always say here that it is at the discretion of that board member, unless otherwise noted, it is at the discretion of that board member as to what that gift is. Oftentimes we do not want people to feel like they are forced to give at a particular level. So we often kind of phrase it as a gift or give as it relates to personal significance, right? So it's really up to that board member. And then officers, typically there's president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and this is considered sorry, I know there was a delay there. I could tell. You can keep going. In the bylaws here, no officer shall, for reason of his office, be entitled to receive salary or compensation. That is typically in the bylaws. And so here's about committees. So there's a section there. You can keep going. For these particular bylaws, if there are any amendments, there's a section on how to do that. So again, this is a sample. Bylaws are written differently and unique to a particular 501c3. We can go back to gallery view now. In your manual, well, I don't want to move too quickly. There's a request for the sample bylaws there. I think there is, aren't there some links, Rebecca and Leslie, aren't there some links to bylaws on the NC Center website? And folks have access to that, right?
Yeah, so we do have some samples of things that are provided in Info Central for our members. But from time to time, we will provide for this cohort links to things that would normally be behind that member wall.
Okay.
And the a sample bylaw, a template, we can provide that for this session. That would be helpful, folks. Yeah.
Okay. So we can do that. Can we do that in the wrapparound? Is that
yes,
that would happen? Okay.
Yep, I'll make a note of that. That we'll include that in there. Thank you.
Yep. And then in your book, in your manual, page 33, and then that'll kind of close out our duties and expectations and responsibilities, kind of overarching for boards of directors and board members. Page 33 is a checklist of board responsibilities. And so we've provided that there for you, as you may be trying to develop maybe a job description for a board member, you can definitely use this. I'm thinking that we might need a quick break. That was quite a bit of material. So Lisa and Rebecca, I'm gonna ask your permission to let everybody have about a 3 to 5 minute kind of intermission. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's good. 5 minutes.
So it's 11:03. So let's come back at 11:08 or 9. We are somewhat at the top of the hour of 11 o'clock. And so we're moving right on through our session today. And just as a recap, so if you're like me, you kind of want to organize your thoughts, and that's a lot of information. So where are we? in all this. So I'm just gonna go down the list of what we've covered so far this morning. And if you want to jot these down, that's fine. If you're good, then you can kind of listen in. But just so that before we go into this new topic, I just want to make sure that we are understanding where we are. So we started off with board governance, and we learned about the definition of a board of directors and a board member. And so we talked about that. We learned the kind of general organizational structure of a nonprofit, just kind of on a real fundamental level. We learned about duties of loyalty, duty of care, and duty of obedience. So those are what we call fiduciary responsibilities of 501c3 organizations in the United States, right? So we learned about that. We also shared the legal compliance checklist, and that does, we do cover that towards the end of our session today. So we're not moving quickly past that. So we did highlight that. Bylaws, that the bylaws is where we will find how the board of directors functions and its composition, etc. And then we also looked at the board responsibilities checklist. And from the start of the topic on board governance, we've been talking about the board responsibilities. That's what we've been talking about as a whole. So that's kind of where we are in our material. And we're getting ready to go into financial management and fundraising responsibilities. So just want to make sure that we're all together. We're going to start with financial management. Now, we have an entire session on financial management. And as a part of that session, we will have our Chief Financial Officer of the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits will join us for that session and share with us some fundamental practices as it relates to that. So in this context this morning, we're looking at financial management and fundraising responsibilities of a board. So how they are responsible and what ways they are responsible. And so we're going to start with financial reports and budgets. And basically what we want to do here, for those of you who've never seen these documents, we're going to go over this in detail when we get to financial management. But as a part of the responsibilities of board members and boards of directors, we are responsible for audits, right? Making sure that the nonprofit has an audit with assistance from the staff. It's not just the board, but it is the staff and the board. The 990, which is the tax document that we submit to the Internal Revenue every year, and the annual report. And that's another document that we are responsible for, as well as the budget and financial statements. So I'm going to have my team do some screen sharing. Again, we're not going to take a deep dive into this morning. This will come up again in the financial management workshop, but we are going to just kind of give you a sense of what these documents look like, and you can begin to identify and review these documents with your own nonprofit. So again, audit, 990, annual report, and financial material and information. So we are looking at, this is all public information. This is the website for Big Brothers Big Sisters organization. And on the website, you'll see all of the financial audits from 2016 to 2019. You will see the 990s that have been submitted so far, and you also see their annual reports. And so again, we're just going to kind of highlight these. So let's go to the 990 first. So every year, nonprofit organizations are to submit a 990. The board chair and the executive director and or president and CEO typically signs off on this document, and or the board treasurer. And so we might need to make it a little bigger. So this is one of the 990s for this particular nonprofit. And so again, we're going to study this in depth in our financial management topic. But this is that particular nonprofit organization. Again, you see Form 990 in the top left corner. This is an internal revenue form that is completed. And so it highlights the very first page of this are a summary of the activities and governance, revenues and expenses. And it shows kind of where we are in terms of kind of a balance sheet. If you're familiar with reviewing a balance sheet, you can also see the total assets and total liabilities that are located here in this particular document. Now, there are more pages to this, but we just want you to kind of know that this is one of those documents that a nonprofit files that we as board members should be aware of. The next thing I want us to look at is the annual report. And so another document that most nonprofits produce every year is an annual report. Some are a little bit more elaborate, if I could say, than others. Depends on what your budget is. Now that most annual reports are posted electronically, we probably see a little bit more full color annual reports these days than we used to, because you can post them electronically. So if we could just scroll through here. So here's the annual report that aligns with that 990. Notice this is 2019. Well, this one is 2018 to 2019. And in the annual report, typically it highlights areas of programs. And it also includes the board of directors and different entities that are part of leadership. Their outcomes, typically we talk about impact and how all of that works. Here you've got a layout of, since this is Big Brothers Big Sisters, they're highlighting the matches that have occurred. You can keep going. Here's some information about their strategic plan. You know, they're given an update about that. Here's the financial information. Typically there's a picture, if you will, of where dollars have been spent and dollars that have come in. So again, an annual report is essential to the reporting out of most nonprofits. Here's a section highlighting the different programs. And if you go ahead to slide, I think it's 16. You also see, looks like this is showing level the different organizations that they have. Since this is a large nonprofit, here are supporters or donors. You oftentimes see that in an annual report. And I think that does it. And we can go back to gallery view. Thank you. So this again is, we're looking at financial management of a nonprofit. And these are some of the primary pieces of information that nonprofits have to report out. When we are doing the financial management workshop, we'll do a deep dive into budget. We'll do a deep dive into looking at profit and loss and balance sheets and all of that. But for today, the focus is, this is one of those areas of governance and oversight that is the responsibility of board members. I'm going to pause there because I've been talking quite a bit. So Lisa and Rebecca, I'm going to see if folks have questions about that.
This question may just be a matter of style, but I've been working to create a framework for our annual report that doesn't have to be reinvented year after year. And, the board seems to really like the short and sweet, almost like a pictorial history. And, we've tried to keep it to 2 pages front and back. Originally they wanted it to be 1 page, and I felt like that was impossible. And there are many that are, 20 plus pages. So we were trying to find that sweet spot. But do you have any recommendations for like the non-negotiables? We give a picture of our income and expense, and our program strategy, and a general narrative report on each program. And then we include our sponsors, and then our high level donors, the major gifts. But I'm just wondering if you feel like there are elements that simply cannot be excluded.
You name the ones that need to be in the report. You name them, all of them. The financials, the program highlights, the outcomes, because after all, we're taking in dollars and we're spending those dollars to make a difference. And so that's important. Noting who your donors are, give or take. I mean, that's always good to include. One of the things I noticed about the example that we shared is you don't always see a strategic plan update in an annual report. Not always. I mean, that I would say that was a little unique for that one. But you named them. You named the primary ones. Yes.
Dr. Palmer, what kind of staff person helps with those kinds of that elaborate? Elaborate annual report.
It varies.
Are there people that help do that?
So yes. So typically the executive director or the president and CEO is eyes on this. Definitely needs to make sure they give the A-OK, that this is okay to disseminate to the public. So it is the responsibility of the executive director, president, and CEO, and they might delegate responsibility to others. Like, for example, you're going to have to engage your program staff because you need the information about programs. You're going to need to engage your whoever's handling the bookkeeping and the financial management internally, because that person has information to contribute. Now, you might decide, if you have that type of staff resource, you may decide that you're going to have a point person, right, that is working directly with that executive director or president and CEO to help to develop and to put the annual report together. Oftentimes, I see it as a part of the financial officer, the chief financial officer's duties and responsibilities, but it's really a joint effort. Because you need information from so many different facets of the agency.
Thank you.
Dr. Palmer, my question was, what about the reporting that we have to give to NC Secretary of State's office?
So yes, the Secretary of State's office requires that all businesses and nonprofits provide them with the annual report. I do know that the Secretary of State's office, sometimes they have a form that you fill out, and it may not necessarily be the annual report like we showed it, or you can do both. You can fill out the form and you can upload the annual report.
Thank you.
Val is asking you, is an annual report required?
It's expected.
I would say yes.
It's expected. It is expected.
Yeah, especially if you're writing grants and you're reporting out to your grantors. I mean, I think it's a nice thing to include in terms of and they may ask or they may not, but it's always nice to include it.
It is a common practice. It's a common practice. And the Secretary of State's office will send you communication asking for it. So as it does with businesses. There was someone trying to say something. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say it also helps when you're completing your candid profile through GuideStar, but I find that it's really helpful for new staff, especially administrative staff. It was for me coming on as an ED, and being able to look back at that document helped me piece a lot of other individual documentation together. And I feel like it also is kind of a cultural or personality identifier as well. So like really looking at the branding and giving an idea of like what image has been projected to that point and, you know, where to go from there. It's also provided like a consistent method of reporting for us.
And I see the question about what kind of format. I think that has a lot to do with style. It has a lot to do with what the preference is for your agency and also what you can afford. You know, because there is a cost. You know, if what we showed from this Big Brothers Big Sisters, or that's a graphic designer. I mean, so, you know, do you want a Canva level, you know, where you can do it in-house, or do you want a graphic design level, you know, or if you have someone on your staff already who's doing the PR and the marketing and the communication, helping with that, then of course they would be a part of putting that together as well. I saw some other questions. I saw several questions and I don't want to not answer them.
If your fiscal year is December to December or June to June, when should it come out? Is it, you know, within 3 months after the year ends, or when is that the best practices in that space?
I would say you want it to come out as soon as possible after you submit your 990. So whatever cycle your 990 is on, if you're on a calendar year that's January to December, that you would have told the Internal Revenue what your fiscal year is when the nonprofit completed the 501c3 application. So you want to kind of go back to that. And then you want to complete the annual report as soon after as possible, because if it's too late, then you're already into the next year and you're, you know, so I don't know if that's 2 months for you or 3 months. It just depends on when some of that data is available, because sometimes the data isn't available yet. Okay. Was there another question? I thought I heard someone.
It says Sheena, you cannot raise or accept funds if not filed with the Secretary of State, correct?
It depends. It depends. There are some nonprofits who, you're talking about a solicitation license. That's as it relates to fundraising. Sometimes the solicitation license is waived. It depends on your nonprofit. So you have to apply and then they'll let you know. Okay, I'm gonna have to move on. Okay, all righty. So our next topic is fundraising, right? Fundraising responsibilities. I think for the most part, we know the essence of fundraising, and we do have a workshop that where we'll do a deeper dive into that. In your workbook, in your handbook on page 34, there is a document there that tells us what fundraising is not. And so in terms of thinking about fundraising, we know that we engage in really asking individuals for cash and asking foundations and organizations and businesses and individuals to give to our nonprofit as we fundraise to raise money. Some would argue that fundraising is raising friends, you know. Well, it can be both. It can be raising funds and raising friends. And it's important to understand too that we should have a fundraising plan, that we should not be reactive in fundraising. We should be proactive in fundraising. And so that's important to remember. We want to cultivate relationships with individuals and or organizations or entities that will give money and or other assets to our nonprofit organization. And that looks different for every nonprofit. You know, some nonprofits are heavily funded by way of a government allocation, right? And some are not. And so, you know, we want to make sure that we really kind of understand that there is a difference in that. Again, we have a workshop where we will do nothing but learn about fundraising. And so fundraising is a way to bring dollars and or assets into your organization for the purpose of achieving your mission. And so, so that is our responsibility as it relates to fundraising. Human resources, if we could go to the PowerPoint slide, please. What we want to highlight here is that as a part of board governance, we are responsible for raising resources, that's money and other resources, so that we can fund the personnel or human resources that we need. And we've talked about equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout this morning. And that is another part of what we at the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits consider to be essential as a part of our managing our human resources. And then board recruitment and retention, that's another area of human resources. And we know that it takes dollars sometimes to recruit and retain board members. And then employee recruitment and retention. So there's board recruitment and retention and employee recruitment and retention. And I'm gonna pause and let us pop this up on the screen. So this is slide 18. So here's kind of what I was speaking from in terms of the board governance, because keep in mind, that's the topic that we're focused on. So it's important for our board of directors to work in a way where equity, diversity, and inclusion is a part of what we do. Board recruitment and retention, employee recruitment and retention, from the perspective of making sure that we have an apparatus in place to handle personnel administration. I don't want this bullet point, employee recruitment and retention, to be confused with the board goes out and recruits and retains employees. That is the responsibility of the executive director or president and CEO. Professional development of staff and board development. So here we're talking about our board of directors helping to bring in funds to be able to do and engage in this way. And then also capacity building. So we talked earlier about what capacity building is, and we see capacity building as an essential part of making sure that our human resource area of management is working the way that it should. And so we are responsible for that. In your principles and practices guide, and I'm going to pass this over to Lisa, in your principles and practices guide on page 9 is our equity, diversity, and inclusion principle. Rebecca alluded to this earlier. I've mentioned this in my sharing with you this morning, but we just want to remind you that this is an area of focus that is important to the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. And so Lisa, I'm gonna let you do the highlights for that.
Sorry,
Craig,
I'll mute again.
go
ahead.
hold
No,
on,
go
Lisa.
ahead. Go ahead.
Craig, whether it's 2 employees or 200, it still remains that if there is a executive director or president and CEO, they are responsible for the day-to-day operations. Now, there are nonprofits who are volunteer driven, and they have more volunteers, let's say, than they do staff. We need to talk a little bit more about what your situation is before I would make any recommendations. But if you have paid staff, if a nonprofit has paid staff, that is why they are paid. They are paid to do the work. And so there are some unique situations where that is a little different than the org chart that we shared. But that's in essence how it's supposed to work. Lisa?
Sure. Just quickly, just to go over again, our equity, diversity, and inclusion that we're incorporating here at the center. Again, as Rebecca, I believe, alluded to earlier, this is something that the center is taking on consideration in 3 main areas at the center. And again, where we've made mistakes and we've gone back and we've highlighted, we're making some revisions to our strategic plan to make sure these 3 items are within our strategic plan. One is to talk about and give capacity building trainings on how do you address the racial leadership gap that's in our sector, the sector's generational leadership gap, because we know we have people coming and going and retiring out, and also going over our policies, practices, and organizational culture in nonprofits that exacerbates these gaps. So again, these are things that the center, charges that the center has taken on. And again, as we move forward, because we too are in a strategic planning mode, how do we deliver programming, capacity building, training entities that talk about how do you include equity, diversity, and inclusion in all your programming, in your policies, treatment of staff, again, especially around compensation. At the end of this session, we'll redirect you back again to the compensation surveys that are going out to make sure that all of your compensation that you have with all the compensations you have within your agency are fair and equitable. So again, I would advise you going over page 9, if this is important to you, to make sure that you're incorporating this into your practices as well. Try to keep that short, Dr. Palmer.
All right, thank you. There's a question about best practices for board recruitment. Rebecca, is that something that we can maybe include in the wraparound? You'd have to direct me on that.
Yeah, we can look up a resource on that. I'm sure we have
Okay.
something in Info Central. I'll make a note here in my wraparound
Okay,
checklist here. There was a couple other questions above.
okay.
Very small organization, only 2 employees. What's the board's role and duty and understanding and being informed of personnel issues?
I think I answered that
Oh,
one to
did you?
some degree.
Yeah, there's a
but-
next one under that.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. You see that? You want to read that one, Rebecca, or you want me to?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
What are best practices for funding HR when a large percentage of nonprofit funding sources are restricted to program outputs versus org structure, infrastructure? That's a good question.
Mhm.
Very
So
common. Mhm.
there are capacity building partners around the state. There's about 5 of them that we at the North Carolina Center we work with, and several of them have a human resource pro bono resource, as does the NC Center. I would say connect with us directly on that, because there's a lot of different ways to approach that limitation of not having human resource dollars, dollars set aside for personnel administration and human resources. Most of our nonprofits, if you look at the laundry list of human resource tasks, most of our nonprofits delegate those tasks to staff members, particularly if there are not that many staff. So I'm proceeding with caution on what to recommend without knowing more about what your structure is and how it's set up. But there are some resources, again, if you're a member of the NC Center, there are resources available around human resources and that are affordable. And there are capacity building partners that the NC Center aligns with and works with that might be close to where you are, you might be able to find some resources there. And we are going to do a human resource workshop as a part of the Institute, so.
Yeah, and Dr. Palmer, let me just for clarity, and when I was referring to the page 9, I was talking about our principle and practices booklet. I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier to guide you better, but page 9 has this booklet has all 12 of our principles and practices within it. Just wanted to make that.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move along to accountability and evaluation, right? We're talking board governance. And so boards of directors can add a lot of value to assisting staff with training and resources for training. And also it is the board of directors' responsibility to evaluate the performance of the executive director and or president and CEO. And so, so that's important to keep in mind. There is also a difference in and I mentioned this earlier, the board of directors responsibility and the executive director. There's a difference. The board chair versus the executive director. Evaluating ourselves as a board and evaluating the executive director. And another element of accountability and evaluation is to support and lead strategic planning. Now, I'm going to refer you to about 5 different handouts in your manual. Page 35 is where I'm going to start. And that's oversight and governance. So at this juncture of our workshop today, we have covered governance and oversight from beginning to now. And so what we did though, is we put a page in your manual, a handout in your manual, so that you would have it kind of in writing, what oversight means as it relates to a board and what governance means as it relates to a board. And so we're raising money, we're being influential, we might have some special skills that we can offer, we're ambassadors. We are also helping with strategic planning and compliance, and we are doing kind of some overarching evaluation of how well the nonprofit is doing. And of course, we attend board meetings on a regular basis so that we are informed, and we are also invited not only to give money, but also to give of ourselves to participate in the work of a nonprofit. So oversight and governance are our 2 overarching kind of areas of work. Board responsibilities checklist, we've already covered that. That was on page 33, but I want to remind you that that's there for you. Page 36, the board of directors job descriptions. This is a handy little tool and handout. It gives a description of board members, the vice chair, the committee chair, if you have committees, the secretary of the board, and the treasurer of the board. And the reason we don't have the board chair on this handout is because we have a special handout for that. And it is, go with me, I'm going to have you skip over one. It is on page 38. So we have the job description of the board chair. Job description of the board chair. And then here's one that I think is going to be most helpful. And that's on page 39. Board chair versus executive director. Board chair versus executive director. Board chair versus executive director. And then if you go back to page 37, we've got board of directors versus executive director. Okay, board of directors versus executive director. So if you look at page 35 through 39, what this helps us to understand are the specific roles of the board of directors. And again, I'm going to go through that one more time, and I'm going to go in number order in the pages that you have. So page 35 is what? Give me a shout out. What's on page 35?
Oversight versus governance.
Oversight and governance.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And then on page 36, what do we have? What's there? We can go back to the gallery view now. What's on page 36?
Job description.
Job descriptions. We've got job descriptions of board members, a vice chair, the committee chair, secretary, and treasurer. What's on page 37?
Board versus
Board of directors versus executive director.
This is very important. Sometimes as board members, we don't know what our role is and we step out of our lane. And so when we have an executive director in place, that individual is responsible for day-to-day operations. And we are considered, we are to be focused on governance and oversight. So those a high level way of thinking about what our responsibilities are. What's on page 38?
Board chair job description.
Board chair job description. I think that speaks for itself. What's on page 39?
The board chair versus executive director responsibilities.
This is important. Sometimes our board chairs don't know what their responsibilities are. They don't know what their specific role is. A board chair is not responsible for the day-to-day operations. They can support, they can make recommendations, they can inquire with the executive director. It should be a partnership. It should be a partnership working towards the mission. I'm gonna just let you sit with these documents for just a couple of minutes, let you ask any questions you might have, and I'm just gonna go silent and just let you kind of peruse these documents.
While you're doing that, Dr. Paul, we do have a question. If you have committees, is it expected that every board member be on one?
There are instances where it is in the bylaws that a board member should serve on at least one committee. And I would say if it's not in the bylaws, it's kind of difficult to hold them to that. But typically, if it is an expectation, it's in the bylaws.
Now, if you have a tripartite board, which is the governmental boards, which Dr. Palmer talked about earlier about structure, where you have a third of business, third community, and a third of community members, usually they do require your committees to reflect the same, a third, and a third on the committees, just as an added note.
So again, I'm gonna go silent just for like a minute or two, let you look over these handouts. Don't want to go too fast, but these are now in your library, so you can reference these. But if there's anything that you see there that you're not clear about, this is a good time to pose the question. And
Dr.
then
Palmer, do you want me to read? I'm sorry, do you want me to read you the questions or?
Yeah,
that are popping up?
Yep, go ahead.
There's a general idea. Is there a general idea of board size versus org size?
So I have a different recommendation depending on if you are starting a nonprofit, right? As opposed to whether your nonprofit has been in existence for a while. Composition is explained in the bylaws, and composition of a board should align with what your overall mission and purpose is. So whenever I'm working with groups that are starting a nonprofit, I typically have them start with 3, definitely not more than 5, until they kind of get the nonprofit going. You can always change your composition. Nonprofits that have been in existence for a while and have expanded their boards may have found that they didn't need to expand the composition. And so they kind of go in the opposite direction. So it just depends on where you are and what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Should the executive director be a member of each committee?
It's going to be difficult for the executive director to be a member of every committee. However, the executive director should be aware of what is happening with every committee. Now, let's just say your finance committee, if you have a CFO, if you have someone on your staff, that individual is probably going to be the most helpful to that committee because of what they do. If you have a program committee, individuals that are a part of programming on your staff are probably going to be most helpful because they're in the day-to-day work of programming and services. And so I don't know if it's realistic. Again, every nonprofit is different. your mission is different. The number of programs you have is different. I think that has a lot to do with how much the executive director interfaces with the committee, but they should definitely know what's happening with every committee.
Mhm. You have another question from Heather, but it's in reference to the ED evaluation tool. So we can wait on that until you.
Yeah,
go
we're
into
going to
it.
use that here in a
Yeah.
minute. We're going to use that, Heather, in a breakout. How we feeling? Give me some ideas. How we doing? This is a lot of information. How's it going? I'm not physically with you, so it can be hard for me to tell. Show me some reactions in this, using this thing, Rebecca, this reaction thing down here, this tool. So I need to know where we at. I can't see y'all. I can't see all of you all.
We're seeing some thumbs up down there. There's hearts, there's laughter. If you're delirious, like some of us at this point in this 3 hour, 2.5 hours in, yep, we've got some laughing eyes. We've got some, what else? We've got this one says, when I hover over it, it says ta-da. It's like a celebration explosion.
Okay.
We've got some of you that maybe open mouth like, this is a lot of information. Oh, there we go. We got some squiggly eyes. Nice, Francesca. Nice. Yeah.
We understand.
We do. Boy, do we understand.
Dr. Palmer, I meant to ask you a quick
I see
question.
Pizza. Is it lunchtime?
Pizza? Oh my
I've got
God.
pizza on the brain. I'm hungry.
One quick question, Dr. Palmer. I don't
Mhm.
know if you said it or not about quorum. When the person was asking about board size, what about having a quorum? How
Oh,
important
yes.
is that? Mhm.
Yeah, so your bylaws are gonna dictate that. Typically in your bylaws, if there's should be a section on voting for voting matters. And so typically your quorum is outlined there. Some boards require that a quorum is 1/3 of the total number. Some require that it's half. Some require that it's a little over half. So that information is going to be in your bylaws. I always find it interesting, and that's because I'm a geek when it comes to this stuff. When I read bylaws for a nonprofit that's 100 years old, and the bylaws have been typed like on a manual typewriter. Any witnesses on here? Have you seen any bylaws like that? And you start to read like how they make decisions, and it's like, oh, it's time to amend these, or it's time to change these. So my answer to that, Lisa, is that that information is found in your bylaws. And a quorum is determined by the individuals who established the 501c3. It can that can be changed. It just requires that the board approve that there be a change. Okay. Whew. I know this is all fruitful information. So we have 2 more topics for today, I believe. Wait, is it 2 or 3? It's 2.5, because the last part of our time together is about bylaws and legal compliance, and we've kind of covered that a couple of times already. So we've got 2 more things to do. One is we're going to do a little bit of practicing on evaluating our board of directors. Now, in your packet, we have a worksheet called the Executive Director Position Review Worksheet. That's not going to be our focus. Our focus is going to be the board of directors evaluation. And what that worksheet is, though, is it just helps to give you a sense of what you should be thinking about as it relates to holding the executive director accountable, and us being accountable as board members to the executive director. So it's really an outline of information that we should understand and know about the executive director, right? So that's that. And if I could make a note, yeah, I'll leave it at that for that. And then the board of directors evaluation is on page 41 and 42. And we're going to go into breakouts to do this. But team, let's take a 3-minute break before we go into breakout. Let's give everybody a respite before we go into our breakout. So when we come back, I'll repeat those instructions But that's where we're headed. If you all need a break. Task that we have is the evaluation of the board of directors. So just like we evaluate staff and we evaluate the executive director, we should also do some introspective evaluation of our work as providing governance and oversight. And so what we did is we put an evaluation tool in your packet. That's page 41 and 42. And so what I want you to do first is go ahead and begin to complete this evaluation of a board that you're currently a part of, right? Or if you are staff on this, in this class or in this institute, you can evaluate the board of the organization that you're representing today. So you decide what board you want to evaluate in terms of using the tool. Once you've spent some time doing that, we're going to go into breakout rooms, and you're going to share your results in your breakout room. So in just a couple of minutes, Rebecca and or Leslie is going to pop you into a breakout room. So you won't hear me again. You'll just go right into breakout, and you will begin having conversation about what it is that how you evaluated your board, and also introduce yourself to each other if it's a different breakout than you were in last week.
All right.
And we'll report back, Rebecca. Right now it's what, about 12:02, 12:03.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll report back at, say, 12:10.
Okay.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. We'll have 6 of them in total. Like Dr. Palmer said, please introduce yourselves, designate someone as a report back. I don't know if we'll have enough time to hear from all groups, but do want to have somebody designated as a report back. And you'll be reviewing that board of directors evaluation and discussing that amongst yourselves. So opening the rooms up. Folks are.
Oh, you're back to it. I'm going to go off camera again and listen.
Okay.
Yep, folks are coming back into the main
Welcome
room.
back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Ooh. That static noise.
Yeah.
All right, I had to mute everyone. We were getting some feedback, but okay.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to jump right back into our work. And if I could pose a question to the group, what insight did you gain from the discussion? What insight did you gain from the discussion related to evaluating the board of directors? Sometimes we forget to evaluate the board.
I'll start in our group from the ones that had an opportunity to speak. Our boards are small, fairly new, and then we had one that was very large, but in the diagram, she is 2 steps removed from the board of directors, so doesn't have a whole lot of interaction with the a board of directors. And then we had one that was a 501c4. And so just looking for some information and good practices. So we had a great discussion, I think. And thank you, Dr. Regina, for suggesting that I be the one to speak, but thank you.
Let's hear maybe one or two more. We won't be able to hear all six, but let's hear a couple more.
I'll talk. My group was in room 2, just because I didn't get a chance to speak in the group, which is fine. But what I heard were we had a lot of individuals that were kind of new to the process, new and maybe never sat on a board, or they're just beginning their process, or starting a nonprofit. So they didn't have a lot of insight, but we did have an individual who was having a very hard time with their board, just not having engaged members. And that can be really difficult, especially when it comes to evaluation. She did mention that, everything's red right now because she just had a really hard time just in her role as an executive director, and served on the board before that. So she kind of has both sides of that. And she's been able to she's been in a struggle with that as far from what I hear. And another individual who had a board who has half really engaged people, half not, but some of those engaged people are too engaged, and so they micromanage. And so that can be really difficult when it comes to evaluation and everything too. So,
yeah, I'll be the first to admit it can be tough navigating a board of directors. It takes time to kind of get us as a collective board, kind of walking in lockstep with the person who's running the operation. Sometimes that gets a little confusing. And as much building of capacity that we can do to help board members really understand this, the better off we know. So I don't have one solution to that. Of course, it's all based on the situation and just kind of how things are going in terms of the life cycle of the nonprofit and so on and so forth. And I think you all kind of understand that. So it is oftentimes my approach to really listen to what the whole context is, to determine what's the best way forward. But it can definitely be challenging to a person who is in that executive director role when we're confused, don't understand at really how that is supposed to operate. My hat's off to that person. I don't know who that is, but my hat's off to that person or persons who has found themselves in that situation. It does take time to work through that. So I'll take one more, and then that'll be half of the group.
I'm not sure what group we were, what number group we were, but really just piggybacking on what the other ladies have said, we've had a lot of the same. We had someone who had a really large board that has, done great things. We have another member that is just taken over, an organization and is really having to evaluate if the board members really reflect or still reflect, their participants and the people they're serving. I'm not the ED. I've never been to one of our board meetings, so I'm just very curious as to how our ED would reflect on our board. Someone else said, still struggling with engagement of their board members. But I think we just all agreed that this is a good tool to have whenever there is a good time to use it. So all in different places.
Right. And there are, thank you, Meredith, there are other sources that are available in terms of doing board evaluations. There's like report card style. I mean, there are different ways to actually do that. I'm going to move into our, we're just about at our final topic for today, and that's board composition. We have already actually covered this, and there are kind of 3 areas that we focus on with this. That's the demographics and the characteristics of our board, which we've discussed. Typically, that's outlined in the bylaws. I say, we call it the size and shape of the board. So the number of board members and in terms of composition, and also the characteristics from the perspective. Are they from business? Are they from education? Are they representing the government community? Are they an elected official? I mean, it just varies as to what and who might be on our boards. And we've talked about the executive committee. That is the slate of officers. Oftentimes, the executive director is working very closely with the executive committee. Most of the individuals that make up the executive committee spend more time interfacing with the nonprofit than just say the general board. So that's important to remember. And team, I'm going to move into the very last topic for today, and that is the legal compliance checklist. So the very last topic for board governance is bylaws and legal compliance. And we've already reviewed the bylaws. We know that board members have term limits, and that is found in the bylaws. They have a certain amount of time that they can serve. We've talked about conflict of interest. We want to make sure that they sign a conflict of interest statement saying that they're going to not engage in actions that are a conflict of interest. We don't pay our board members. So that's something that we've already discussed. And our very last topic for today is legal compliance. The North Carolina Center for Nonprofits has what we call a legal compliance checklist to help us to kind of monitor our being compliant as it relates to maintaining our 501c3 status. So I'm going to let Rebecca, she is going to share that checklist with us. That will be our final topic for today. You will get in the wraparound, you will get the lay of the land, right, for today. In terms of what we've covered. And Rebecca, after you do this, if needed, if the group would like, I can start at the top and take us all the way through all the topics that we covered, if that's something that I need to do. Okay. It was great, y'all.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. I don't know how we get through all that. Well done, team. Well done, participants, everybody. This is a good one. Just noting here, this is legal compliance checklist, North Carolina nonprofits. And actually, I believe this is the 2021 one, so I need to download the 2022, which was just released recently, and add that to my frequently accessed documents. But essentially what it does is it goes through for you as a nonprofit to call your attention to various things that you may need to be planning for. It tells you who has to do it. So it tells you which nonprofits are required to either file something, submit something, and then where, how, and when to do it. So the frequency, as well as, if there's a link for a form or where you need to submit something, it'll give that information in this third column there. It's a whopping 13 pages. And not all of these will apply to every nonprofit. So you'll have to go through and sort of determine which things apply to you and which don't. And occasionally our members will reach out to us and ask a clarification question of our team, just to confirm, because sometimes it's a little bit, it's not quite clear whether it is something that they are required to do or not. And so we try our best to help field those questions. And where and when we may need to, it may be a pro bono legal consultation for members who can get an hour of time with a legal expert to help answer a question if it's something that we feel like it's not something that we can actually give information on, that we need to refer them on. So wanted to share that with you all, and more information about that document can be found in our on our website under publications. I see Rosemary said we've used this checklist and it's very helpful. That's great.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. So, phew, breathe, you made it. We're at the end here. Again, I'm always the one between you and lunch. I don't know why they put me in this position, but here I am. Again, if Rebecca and Dr. Palmer have referenced a lot of resources that are on our membership page, please take a moment. If you're not a member, there are a lot of perks to becoming a member of the center in terms of free resources that you can have. I just want to make a short comment about our short breakouts, especially for this governance session. You know, we had a lot of, normally our breakout sessions would be a little longer, as you saw from our first session, but we had so much information to pack in here. We wanted to make sure we got through it all. So we're up in the air flying. Remember, we already took off. We're up in the air now. So it doesn't come down yet to get any slower. It's going to be fast paced pretty much going forward. Our next one's program design, management, and evaluation. So I hope all of you will be present for that. Again, at the end of this, we'll be sending out evaluations that we appreciate if you can take a time to fill that out and send back to us. And lastly, I think I made a plug last time to make sure that it's very important that you take a couple of minutes to fill out the compensation survey for North Carolina. Again, it closes April 1st. And again, this document will give you a lot of good information once the report is out about salary and positions through 140 positions, compensation analysis by budget, agency size, et cetera. And it also gives you a comparison from year to year for local nonprofits. So please, it's very important that you fill this out if you have not done so already. And we thank you. And we're getting done. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Lisa, if I could just make a real quick little plug for next week. So next week, our topic is program design, management, and evaluation. If you could make sure you bring blank paper with you. You can bring big flip chart paper if you'd like, or you could bring just your regular old 8.5 by 11, 11 by 17, whatever your choice is. Try to bring about 3 of whatever it is that you bring. We're going to be doing some more hands-on work. And it's even more fun if you have the Senate markers, colored pencils, crayons, if you have any of that. Otherwise, you can just use your pen or pencil. Okay. So sorry, Lisa. I just wanted to give that quick little plug for what we're doing next week.
That's fine. Other than that, I think we're done. I think you've got 6 minutes to get to lunch and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, maybe you could use those 6 minutes to fill out your session evaluation. We greatly appreciate
do
it.
that.
We had an amazing response rate last time. We
Right.
really do review those. So please take some time to give us some feedback. And we appreciate your time. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Look for our wraparound email.